Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week I begin a two-part series on Call of Cthulhu. I don't have much of a alternate history to talk about with it, so I'm going to be, this week, talking about setting overview. Next week I'm going to be talking about the systems and mechanics. Call of Cthulhu is published by Chaosium Inc., and has gone through multiple editions. Currently it is on its 7th edition, although there are very few significant changes between the editions. In fact, in many instances, you can use older source books and materials with the current editions with very minor adjustments. I will be doing all this discussion based on the 1999 edition. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about Call of Cthulhu. The year is 1921. You are at home in your study when a knock comes to your door. It's the postman. He has a package for you from your old friend, old colleague at Miskatonic University. You open the package, and in this parcel is a strange statue. It's kind of squat humanoid form with the enlarged head and tentacles coming from it where its mouth would be. And the note with it is rambling. Incoherent, really. Which does not sound much like your old friend. But there's some clues in there. Some references to where he got the statue. And you start investigating. Now, this is the 1920s. You can't go about investigating by searching the internet. Computers haven't even been invented yet. So you do your investigating by going to a library, looking through newspaper clippings, through old books in the reserve collection, because as a scholar, you have access to that. Then you make trips to nearby towns that were listed as in the letter, investigating people and things there. And slowly you piece together a story. You piece together that this is an idol, a religious idol for a cult. And the cult is trying to awaken their god. Their god that sleeps in the deep sea. That if he were to awaken, he would rise up and devour humanity. And you know they're close. You've managed to piece together bit by bit by bit that the stars are almost right. That if they do things on time, on the right date, there's a great chance, if this is all true, of success. You've got to do something. But as you investigate, you find the police are in the pockets of the cult. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And that is the nature of a Call of Cthulhu game. It is not something where you're going to go bursting into a room with guns drawn, shoot down the monsters, and then go home and toast victory. It is a game where you are investigating supernatural threats, supernatural existential threats to humanity, and trying to stop them. The default era is the 1920s. That's the default era because that is when H.P. Lovecraft lived. That's when he was his most prolific in writing. Now, some people, some groups, play in the 1890s, which is more focused in England, a more Victorian era game, versus the 1920s with its gangsters and police chases and all that. Of course, you also have the 1990s, or modern day, where some people will like to play in that era just because, look, we got more guns. Except most of the things you deal with, guns aren't going to help you. In most of these cases, your character has the gun to put themselves out of their misery. I mean, most things are not going to be hurt by firearms. You defeat them by either solving the ways to fight them, or by use of specific rituals to deal with them. And then you have things that you just can't deal with normally. Example being the Hounds of Tindalos. These are creatures that come only from where there are corners. So, the way you deal with them is, of course, you put yourself in a room with no corners. That's the only hope you've got. Note that even the corner where the wall meets the ceiling or the wall meets the floor, that's still a corner. So those have to be rounded out. So, if you are dealing with something and you find someone has a perfectly spherical room, they were probably dealing with a Hound of Tindalos at some point. And, oh yeah, they probably starved to death. Because the hounds would be waiting out where there were corners outside of where the person hid. But that's just a minor point. But that would be a clue that this person was dealing with this sort of entity. And, you have all the great classics of H.P. Lovecraft represented in Call of Cthulhu. You have deep ones, Shoggoths, the colors from space, Migo, and all those things. And you are not expected to really fight them directly. A great example, there was a movie back in the 1990s, Cast a Deadly Spell. And this one drew a good bit of inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft because the villain was trying to summon one of the H.P. Lovecraft deities. And the ritual needed a virgin. And the guy who was in charge of it, the guy leading the cult, had the virgin planned. He kept her isolated from men for her whole life, so she would never not be a virgin when the time came. And one of the heroes saved the day by screwing the maiden. Because if she wasn't a virgin, the ritual wouldn't work. And, I mean, he didn't do it for that reason, but that's how they saved the day. So, yeah. That's the sort of thing you have to look at with Call of Cthulhu. You're not going to win by drawing your gun and shooting the cultists. Well, okay, you might win by drawing your guns and shooting the cultists, because, if you kill the whole cult, they can't summon anything on the specific day and time. But you can't guarantee you got them all. Because most cults infiltrate deeply into the towns. Or, are the entire population of the town. See, Innsmouth. Because that is the way things are. And the way the setting is, yes, the default eras are 1890s, 1920s, modern time. But you can adjust it easily to the 1960s, the 1940s, to the 1340s. And it is really very much up to how creative the game master is. Now, a minor detail is in the Call of Cthulhu RPG, they did leave out the War in Heaven. That was not part of what H.P. Lovecraft had written. That was something added in by later authors. And they felt that dismissed and cheapened the inevitable, inexplicable dread and horror by, having things that could help protect you from the things in the Cthulhu mythos. Of course, various arcane texts, various translations of the Necronomicon are still big parts of the setting. Libraries are still protected. Libraries are important because libraries are where you do a lot of your research in the older settings. And they have some absolutely great adventures. Like, one of my favorites is the Horror on the Orient Express mini campaign. Because that is just such an epic game. But this is the quick overview of the Call of Cthulhu RPG. Next week, I'll be talking about the systems and mechanics. Until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.